There is a particular kind of silence that follows a super empath's exit. Not the silence of someone who has nothing left to say, not the silence of defeat. It is the silence of someone who has finally decided that you are no longer worth the energy of a single spoken word. And if you have ever been on the receiving end of that silence, if you have ever watched someone who once moved mountains for you simply stop, then you already know that silence is not emptiness. It is a verdict. Today, we are talking about the super empath's silent revenge. And I want to be very clear about something before we go any further, because this is where most content in this space gets it completely wrong. The super empath does not plan their revenge. They do not sit in a darkened room plotting their next move, calculating how to make the narcissist suffer. That is not who they are. That has never been who they are. The revenge, and it is devastating, it is total, it is permanent, happens entirely as a byproduct of something far more powerful than any plan. It happens as a byproduct of healing. And that is exactly what makes it so unbearable for the narcissist to witness. Let me take you back to the beginning, because to understand what the silence costs the narcissist, you first have to understand what the super empath represented to them. Not in the romantic sense, not in the surface-level way that most people think about relationships. I mean psychologically. I mean at the level of survival. The narcissist lives inside a system. That system is built on one fundamental need: external validation. Not because they are greedy, not because they are simply selfish, but because somewhere deep in their development, the internal mechanism that generates self-worth was either never built or was systematically dismantled. So they do what any organism does when a vital system fails. They find a substitute. They find people. They find admiration, attention, fear, devotion, anything that temporarily fills the space where self-esteem should live. This is what psychology calls narcissistic supply, and most of the people in the narcissist's life provide it, adequately. The colleague who respects them, the friend who laughs at their jokes, the ex who still texts at midnight, all of it feeds the system. All of it keeps the machine running. But the super empath is something else entirely. The super empath does not simply admire the narcissist's performance, they see through it. They have this rare and almost unsettling ability to perceive what is happening underneath, beneath the confidence, the terror beneath the rage, the hollow ache beneath the grandiosity. And here is what makes this so extraordinary and so dangerous at the same time. The super empath sees all of that, sees the fractured, frightened, defended person underneath the carefully constructed mask, and they still stay. They still offer warmth. They still believe in something deeper. They still show up. For the narcissist, this is not just supply. This is the only experience they may have ever had of being truly known by another human being and not immediately abandoned. Think about what that means. Every other source of validation in their life is feeding the mask. Everyone else is responding to the performance, but the super empath is responding to the person. And so the connection that forms, as toxic as it becomes, as damaging as it is, carries a weight that nothing else in the narcissist's life can match. It feels real to them. In a life built almost entirely on performance and pretense, this one relationship feels real. And then they destroy it. Not because they want to, not with any conscious intention to dismantle the one thing that makes them feel human, but because their pathology is stronger than their desire to change. Because the same mechanisms that drive them to control, to manipulate, to devalue and discard, those mechanisms do not make exceptions, not even for the person they need most. The narcissist will inevitably turn their full arsenal on the super empath. The gaslighting, the betrayal, the cruelty that seems almost designed to target precisely what the super empath values most: their trust, their loyalty, their belief in other people's capacity for growth. And the super empath, who has absorbed and forgiven and reframed and stayed far longer than any healthy person should, eventually reaches a threshold. Not an explosion, not a dramatic confrontation, just a quiet internal shift, a moment where something that was stretched to its absolute limit finally, irreversibly breaks, and they leave quietly, completely, without the anger the narcissist expected, without the pleading they were prepared for, without any of the emotional reactions that would have given the narcissist something to work with, just silence. And the narcissist, who has managed and manipulated every relationship exit in their life up to this point, finds themselves completely unprepared for this one. Because you cannot negotiate with silence. You cannot charm it, provoke it, or reframe it in your favor. You cannot convince yourself that the person who left just didn't understand you because they understood you completely. You cannot tell yourself they couldn't handle your complexity because they handled it longer and more gracefully than anyone ever had. The silence of a super empath after betrayal says one thing, and it says it with devastating clarity. I saw everything. I understood everything. I gave you every opportunity, and I have now made my decision that that is end. That is the beginning of the narcissist's unraveling, not because the super empath intended it that way, but because when you remove the one source of nourishment that felt real from a person who has no capacity to nourish themselves, what is left is not grief, what is left is collapse. We are just getting started. Here is what nobody tells you about the narcissist in the days and weeks after the super empath goes silent. From the outside, they look fine, better than fine in some cases. They're back on social media, they're posting, they're visible. They have possibly already moved on to someone new, someone attractive, someone who looks like a replacement, someone they are displaying with the specific energy of a person who needs you to believe they are completely unbothered. And if you are the super empath watching this from a distance, maybe through a mutual friend, maybe through a screen you told yourself you would stop checking, it can feel like confirmation of everything the narcissist ever made you doubt about yourself. It can feel like proof that you never mattered, that the connection you thought was real was entirely one-sided, that they have simply opened the next tab and moved on, while you are still sitting with the wreckage. I need you to understand something. That performance is not recovery. That performance is panic wearing a costume. Because underneath the posts and the new relationship and the carefully curated image of someone thriving, something is happening that the narcissist cannot show anyone and cannot even fully admit to themselves. The internal structure is destabilizing. The internal system that kept them functional, that elaborate network of supply and validation and external regulation, has developed a crack that no amount of new attention can seal. And the reason for that crack is not simply that the super empath left. People have left the narcissist before. The narcissist has survived exits before, sometimes without missing a single beat. The reason this is different comes down to something specific, something structural, something that goes far deeper than heartbreak. The super empath was not just a source of supply, they were the narcissist's emotional regulator. Let me explain what that means in real terms, because it is one of the most important things to understand about why this particular loss is so catastrophic. The narcissist does not have a stable internal world. Their sense of self is fragmented, inconsistent, and deeply dependent on external input to stay coherent. Without a reliable source of emotional grounding, they oscillate rapidly and without warning between states of grandiosity and states of collapse, between feeling like the most exceptional person in any room and feeling like a hollow, worthless nothing.
This oscillation is exhausting and destabilizing, and most people in the narcissist's life cannot manage it. They either fold by the grandiose surface and never see the collapse, or they catch a glimpse of the collapse and retreat, which the narcissist experiences as abandonment and responds with rage. But the super empath stayed through both states. The super empath, with their extraordinary and ultimately costly capacity for holding space, remained calm when the narcissist spiraled. They offered grounding when the narcissist's sense of self began to fragment. They absorbed the rage without retaliating in ways that escalated the chaos. They reflected back a coherent identity when the narcissist's own identity threatened to dissolve entirely. And they did this so consistently, so instinctively, that the narcissist never had to develop any of these capacities for themselves. Why would they? The super empath was always there. The regulation was always available. There was no pressure to build an internal system because an external one was being provided reliably for free. And now it is gone. Now the narcissist is alone with the full, unmanaged force of their internal world. All the feelings they never learned to process are still there,